So he goes into the network closet and he sees the new stuff in the rack and he sees a reset button and he holds it down and he just reset the controller and gateway back to factory settings, takes everything offline. Welcome to Command Control Power, the longest running Apple consulting podcast. For over 10 years, we've produced weekly episodes featuring epic tales of tech support and troubleshooting, discussions about managing our clients and businesses, and interviews with colleagues and vendors. For our pro listeners, we offer Patreon exclusive shows. This private podcast feed is tailor-made for IT professionals looking for advice and guidance on the more challenging aspects of running your practice, working with your clients and employees, and managing your fleets of devices. For a modest monthly contribution, you'll unlock a world of deeper Apple expertise, meaningful connections, and a shared passion for Apple technology. Simply visit commandcontrolpower.com and click support. And now on to the show. Welcome to another episode of Command Control Power. We are recording this on YouTube, so if you want to see the video of this show, you can go to commandcontrolpower.com and look for the YouTube link. That's not there yet. But it will be, we think, probably.
Every week, right? And if you're a Patreon subscriber, you get to see them all.
That's right. And Patreon subscribers can also participate in the live show, and we highlight your comments. We get some feedback going. Just another benefit of Patreon, in addition to all the extra content, all the shows that are a little bit less suited for public consumption, where we get a little bit more candid about our clients, our teams, how we manage acts and things like that. So yeah, great features for patrons there on controlpower.com.
And if you watch the YouTube video, you could see Sam drink his espresso.
That's right.
Oh, yes. Excuse me.
A very handsome Sam with his tracksuit on there and his orange banded Apple Watch
Ultra.
Primo.
Hey, this is NCAA tournament time, so go Huskies. I went to the Big East Conference Championship.
We know.
Yeah.
We follow you on the Facebook. Those kids say the Facebook.
Yeah.
It was the Facebook in the early days, right? That was technically the name.
Until Facebook. Justin Timberlake took it out and took the out in the movie.
In the movie. Probably in real life too.
Yeah.
So have you guys noticed that the Macs are now called laptops? I don't know if this is just me. When you set a name for a Mac, Jerry, you just set up a Mac. This is a good intro for that topic as well. As I've mentioned on the show, we typically set up a Mac with a temporary user account and then get connected remotely and then handle the migration that way rather than doing the initial migration. So when you set up a new Mac and you put in the username without migrating data, it used to say Joe's MacBook Air or Joe's MacBook Pro, right? Now it says Joe's laptop. Just something I noticed. I don't know if it's like a policy change on Apple's side. Why wouldn't they specify? But yeah, that's
things to ponder.
Yeah.
Maybe so Mr. Apple knows something about
Mr.
that.
Apple. Where's the banner?
I cannot disclose.
But Jerry, how was your out-of-the-box experience? You were the first among us to get this new M3 MacBook Air. How's it rocking so far? And what was your reason?
I was away the week they released it. And of course, I'm away, but I'm really not away because I still like to torment both of you guys via text. And my goal was to wind Joe up and get him to buy one day of release.
Yeah.
And he didn't take the bait, but I got home and I've been having a little over 12 months ago when they released the M2 13-inch MacBook Air. I had purchased one with 16 gigs of RAM, a terabyte drive. And I have been, as of late, I would say the last year or so, dealing with an issue where it seems like it's ambient light sensor related, where I'll be off the power cord and it'll go black. And I've done all the troubleshooting that I want to do. So I didn't know whether something was wrong with it. I didn't want to send it to AppleCare. And I also got that midnight finish, which they supposedly improved with this new release, the re-release of the MacBook Air M3 now. They made the midnight finish a little bit better, but it looked like junk. I don't eat potato chips and use my computer, but it looked horrible. Yeah. So between that and trying to do a support call, and all of a sudden I'm off the power cord, and the ambient light sensor just kicking the thing off. I'm like, this is ridiculous. So I put in what I would get for a trade-in for this one that I just mentioned to you, and Apple's willing to give me $960. So I
great
bought
price, honestly.
That is a great price.
Really good, because if you bought that new today, 1 terabyte and 16 gigs, it wouldn't be like, what is it, like 1,500, 14, something
Probably
like that. It's like
somewhere around there.
1,400.
With 1 terabyte, it would be? Oh, okay. I thought it'd be a little bit more. But.
Oh, maybe you know what? No, you're right. It'd be I think it would be 1,700, because I just priced one for a client today with half that storage, and I'm pretty sure it'd be like $200 more. Yeah, so she was at 15. Anyway, pretty good deal though.
Yeah, so I bought a 24 gigabyte RAM, 13-inch MacBook Air M3 with a 1 terabyte drive. And with the trade-in value, it was $66 a month for the next 12 months. Yeah. I'm the guy who pays $3.95 for the egg sandwich and doesn't want to pay any more. So that sounded like a pretty good deal to me.
Was that an Apple Card, Jerry? That you did that financing, or no?
That's the Apple 12-month financing. Okay. Yes. And what amazed me was, and I've seen this before, of course, I think I ordered it just a couple days ago. And last night it was in Osaka, Japan. And then this morning it was actually, I take that back. So the day before yesterday was in Osaka. Before that it was in Shenzhen. And then it went to Anchorage, and it's like here. Yeah. And so it arrived. I know, it's amazing. It arrived this afternoon, and I had 600 gigabytes to transfer. And I had mentioned these cables before on the show, these faster Thunderbolt cables. And I pulled in all that data in 20 minutes. No exaggeration.
That's incredible, honestly.
I know.
Yeah.
So the days of getting together with clients and saying, oh, we'd like to do the migration for you. You've got X amount of data and we're not going to be able to sit there. You could do that. You could talk to the client for 20 minutes and do that.
I remember those days. I used to dread the migration days when I had to go to a client. And sometimes I would just take off and be like, I'll be back in a few hours.
That's exactly what I would do. Up until a couple years ago, or even a year ago, I was doing that, where I'd set it up and then I'd go out and have that $3.95 egg sandwich, and come back a little bit later. And it was
for the egg sandwich,
and it was on my nickel. But hopefully this one will be a little bit better and a little bit more responsive. So who knows?
Yeah, that's great. Really great. The progress is incredible, like you're describing. I've even seen it on Wi-Fi, and we've seen improvements in terms of the storage devices. Obviously, like we're talking back in the days of rotational drives in an iMac. Maybe it was a 2.5-inch drive in a 21.5-inch iMac or whatever, and they were incredibly slow. Or coming from like the original MacBook Air with that, what was it, like a 1.6-inch drive? It was like this really non-standard like rotational drive. You could be sitting there and just watching this thing, like just trying to get started making progress, and it would take forever. So we would bring him back to our office. Before I had an office, I'd bring him to my home, because I just wouldn't want to sit and make small talk. I wouldn't want to drive there and back like you're describing. So we would find workarounds. And then during COVID, we switched to all remote for migrations, and we realized like, oh, it's actually viable now. And so you can do that remotely. And for a while we were waiting. It was like you start the migration and then you're watching the time estimate. You figure it's going to be like 6 hours, whatever you schedule for the next morning to finish the job. But then you've got all these kind of half open tickets and you've got to babysit it sometimes. These days, it's like you're describing, even over Wi-Fi, because when I'm remote, I'm not walking them through plugging in cables and things, but we're just using direct peer-to-peer transfer over Wi-Fi. It's fantastic. It's a matter of like sometimes an hour for data, like up to several hundred gigs, like you're describing. So it's pretty remarkable, because also we don't have to worry as much about Wi-Fi anymore. For a while there, we were like their Wi-Fi would crap out in the middle, or they just had really poor Wi-Fi service or coverage or whatever. These days, it's pretty great. You can migrate like it's nothing. So you were describing the ambient light sensor issue. Were there any other issues on your old system besides the potato chip grease and the sensor issue?
It's really hard to tell. Sometimes I would get a little bit of beach balling, and that could have been RAM constrained. My style is not to have a lot of tabs open per se, and I don't use Chrome primarily. I still use Safari. But Chrome, obviously, if I'm using Adigy, I'm going to do that in Chrome. And there's certain things that I do.
Oh, really? I use Safari for Adigy. I know there's been a few things over the years where it worked better in Adigy or in Chrome here and there. But it's been fine for me in Safari. The only thing I use Chrome for is UniFi these days.
Even that, I find like I don't need Chrome anymore, really.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I know I've told you guys I've been using the Arc browser more and more, but yeah, I found the UniFi sites is perfectly working fine in Safari where it didn't in the past, at least for the things that I'm doing in there.
Yeah, which is probably the same for me. I should just try it because I guess I'm thinking back to the early days of UniFi where you would adopt the thing locally and there was like a Chrome extension or it wasn't even, it was like a Chrome app or something that it was like a UniFi Chrome app thing that required Chrome. And you just had to use Chrome. And I think I got in that habit. I just never,
it was like the Ubiquiti device discovery tool, I think is what it's called.
Exactly. Yeah, man, those early. I have a whole topic on this. Actually, we can talk about going back to the early days. So this came up with UniFi because Tim was on site doing a network installation. And so basically, rewind the clock. We got into UniFi probably a little bit later than you guys did and than most of our colleagues. It was 2017, I think, 2018 when we were doing some of our first installs. So those are coming due, basically. Like they're coming up for renewal. You need new hardware now. And so a couple tips on that, then I'll get into the issue that happened with Tim on site. First of all, my question to you guys is like, how long do you typically estimate for network hardware to last? Same as a Mac, 3 to 5 years, 5 to 7 if it's like residential. What's your typical guidance on that?
I think I'm a little bit less aggressive than the 3 to 5 because it does depend. But in 3 years, it's especially if they have multiple access points and different equipment, it could be a little bit of a hefty price to pay with the cost of those access points. So I give it a little bit of time, especially if everything's fine and the speeds are adequate and everything like that. I'm not pushing the envelope like I am with computers.
Yeah, if it's the first gen cloud keys, obviously they have to go, or the first gen routers, replace that with a Dream Machine or something like that.
Luckily, those have pretty much all given up the ghost by now anyway. Like they were, I don't know. I don't have any first gen cloud keys because for a while there, we were replacing the ones that just died spontaneously. And then also the ones that were still going. These are going to die. We need to come in and replace this. So we did that in some cases within a year of the original install because we just had bad timing on that. And we started to notice like about a year later, they all just started crapping out.
Those were horrible. And the design was bad too. The way they would dangle off the router or dangle off the switch. Like what was that about? Who conceptualized that? The dangle.
So there's those, right? The USG 3, those were out when we were first getting into this, and we had a few of those. I think we've pretty much replaced those original gateways. I don't know I don't think either one of you gave a number. I'm going to just say the number like 5 to 7 years is probably good for network hardware. To help you make the case, or to help us make the case, I found a page on UniFi's site. It's just called Identify Your Access Point Model. And they have a whole list, and they list them by generation. So in those early days when we were just getting into this, the UAP AC, the UAP LR, the long range one, so those were some like the first ones we had experience with. They consider those first generation devices. Second generation would be like the AC Pro. That was one that we used, the M Pro, like those mesh ones. Those were some of the ones we used. And the LR, like a new LR version, long range. Then there's third generation, fourth, fifth, sixth. We're now up to the seventh generation. So it gets a little bit more straightforward here, like with the U7 Pro, that's seventh generation. The U6 line, U6 Mesh, U6 Pro, U6 Enterprise, those are sixth generation, obviously. There was a fifth generation U6 LR. So that's the fifth generation device. Anyway, Nano HD was fourth generation. So we went back to some of our original clients and looked up, okay, what do we have? We have an AC still, an AC Pro. The AC Pro is second generation. The AC HD was third generation. So we went through and looked at this and basically said, okay, so here's a client that has a bunch of like second generation and a couple of third generation devices. And like fast forward, basically that's 4 or 5 generations newer now is what they're offering. So it's really easy to make the case when you say that to a client, right? Here's what you have and here's what the state of the art is. And this is how many generations newer this is. And it depends on the cycle, depends on the age. But yeah, that's one way to make the case. What are some of your networks like out there?
As you were talking, it just made me think it does depend on the network hardware. If I see some older devices, even if it's just been 3 years, let's say, I might opt for a new U6 or new U7 because that's not able to handle as many clients or operate as faster speed. So I think I might opt to change my answer as like a default number and just look on the equipment base, like a USG, I'm going to change that out.
Right.
I actually, since it's been a while since I mentioned him, my buddy at the restaurant, I just replaced his USG with a Dream Machine. I did that all for Jerry, of course.
Thank you.
And
take a drink, everybody.
Yeah. And I replaced his old USG with a UniFi-ed Dream Machine, and it was like under the bar area, and it was so sticky and dirty from like the bar equipment and everything. I'm like, we got to find a better place for this stuff. I'm like, this is not good. But it was funny. I was like, topic for the show. But
exactly.
Yeah, definitely have a variety of network hardware depending on the client and what kind of budget they have and all that stuff.
I think necessity would dictate what to do at a particular client. I think, Joe, in your case, and I'm not saying you're doing this, but you could certainly fish with clients and try to suggest upgrades when they could probably get along for another 12 to 24 months. But if you're looking to generate work, that's a great page to go to make a case, like you said, for the older generation devices. But I think I'm more like Sam, where something's changed in the environment, or we're not just getting the throughput, or just making a compelling case where you say, look, if we replace all these access points, you can get faster speeds of devices. And that usually excites people.
And that's just it in my case. So clients sometimes have issues with Wi-Fi in general. Like even if we installed it and we did everything right, there can sometimes just be little things that are not quite perfect for them. So they're usually interested in upgrading their Wi-Fi. And if you can give them some, real specific examples, like you said, new devices that support Wi-Fi 6, you can get much better speeds. It's just a fact. And so also it's an opportunity for us to maybe improve the design of the network in some ways, that kind of thing. Simplify, make it more resilient to power issues, whatever. So those are some of our kind of cases to make. And I guess on the topic of the latest generation, I think now that we're at Wi-Fi 7 and we do have hardware that supports it, both in terms of devices that are coming out that support it to connect to Wi-Fi 7, but also obviously the U7 Pro from UniFi and probably many more to come. It is a good time to consider doing that because it's a pretty significant change. So one of the benefits with Wi-Fi 7 is multi-link operation, which is something that allows your device to connect using more than one frequency at a time. So you can have a device that roams far from an access point that is able to reach by 2.4 gigahertz, but not by 5 gigahertz. But if you're closer to the access point, it can use the 5 gigahertz simultaneously with the 2.4 to probably drop fewer packets, to have just better bandwidth. So that's like a fundamental difference with Wi-Fi 7. That's just one example. Obviously, there's more frequencies and things like that. So the case can be made to clients. Like, here's what you're running. Here's where we think we can make some improvements. Since we've been doing this now with UniFi for about 7 years, we're at that point where some of those old networks would benefit from new hardware. Now, luckily, UniFi, I think, still supports all of the above, right? Like for updates and things. Are there any devices that, do you guys know offhand if things are not getting updated, if there's like a possible security issue? Because we haven't encountered that yet. But I wonder.
You would see that in your control panel if a device was end of life and it wasn't getting the updates. The other thing, and this is a question for Mr. Apple, I don't think any Apple devices are shipping with 7, correct, at this moment? I think 6E, right?
I think 6E, yeah.
So 7's been ratified, but there's no Apple devices, including this new MacBook Air M3.
Send it back.
Right. Yeah.
I have to buy one next year is what that means.
Exactly. You have to, yeah. Wi-Fi 6, I feel like with that just came out. I didn't even have a chance to like really decide. It's like, do I want Wi-Fi 6? Can I sell it to clients? That kind of thing until Wi-Fi 7 came out. But to your point, I think Wi-Fi 6, if the hardware supports like Wi-Fi 6E, that is like forward compatible. Like it's a good thing to have if you're installing a new UniFi or Eero network or whatever it is. You want to make sure you have at least 6E. Okay, so then, I don't think we have the end of life issue yet to worry about, but that probably will start to come into play as well. The thing that happened on site, of course, Tim spec'd out this client's network, and it was a pretty big one, pretty big residence, and something like 10 APs and like a few switches and gateway and whatever. And so he looked at the portal, figured out what we needed, made the proposal, we negotiated with the client and followed up and got it booked. So he went on site with all the new equipment. So one really nice benefit is that a lot of the current APs can be swapped out and use the existing mounts. So you can just literally pop the old one off, put the new one in, which is great. However, the thing that Tim didn't realize and I didn't think about and we didn't account for going in.
Can we guess? Guess?
Please, guessing game. Okay.
Sam, you go first.
Well, no, you can't just put me on the spot. Can we guess?
All right,
Sam, you go first.
I know.
Sam, you go.
Can Sam
I was
guess?
being nice. I was being a nice guy.
All right, what's your guess, Jerry? What?
Because you don't have enough power going through from the switch to drive the APs.
Close. Yeah. Okay. That's not it. No. It comes into play though. It's tangential.
The type of settings on the ports.
No, but that's another guess. We can talk about PoE. No. Any other guesses?
Plus?
PoE plus. No, we'll get to PoE plus though. All right. So the issue is that some of those older APs have 2 Ethernet ports.
Yeah.
And none of the current ones do.
Yeah.
Okay. So this has not come up for us yet.
And you were uplinking off of it or feeding off of it?
In a surprising number of cases at one of these clients. So we've just done 2 big network projects, like all new UniFi stuff. One was totally fine and normal. The other one was like, oh, I don't know why we ended up having to pull off of this AP to like power this random device that's in a closet where the AP is, or not power, but provide a wired connection. Or in one case, there was a switch that was coming off of an AP that then went to other stuff. I'm not sure who installed this network on my team. It might not have been Tim. Even if it was like 7 years ago, you make it work. We were replacing, it could have been you, Jerry, exactly. And we were replacing an older like Ruckus thing that was like under spec for the house when they first built the house. And I've probably talked about this before where they had 10 100 switches in there and stuff like that, where it's just like, why are you selling the client switches that are like 10 years old? All right. Anyway, so we get there. He figures out that actually there's several cases where there's a second port in use. Examples are the AC Pro, the AC HD. Those are both really commonly used. We've used a bunch of those, and they both had two Ethernet ports, which allows the pass-through, obviously. Of course, it was never best practice. Make it work sometimes. The newer APs, the U6 Pro, the U6 Plus, and the U7 Pro do not have a second port. And I couldn't find any that do. I think only the U6 in-wall, which is like a weird product. It's like an AP that has like a switch in it, and so you can take one port that's like your uplink, have an AP, and have a switch built in, essentially.
I have one right behind me, yeah.
Oh, really? Yeah. So good product? How does it work?
I don't think it's the U6 version, but yeah, it's a good product. It does exactly what I need. I feed a couple of Ethernet ports off of it.
Nice. And so they call it an in-wall. Do you need to put it in like a box in the wall? Like how do you?
Yeah. It fits those electrical boxes. Just
like a junction box or whatever.
Yeah,
okay.
That's the word.
Interesting. So that's an option as well. And I'm not sure if we would have used that if we had planned ahead for this so anyway, basically the advice is look at this. And I'm not sure where in the UniFi portal you'd see this like exactly. I guess you could see that a device has a wired uplink from an AP if it's just listed that way. So you just want to look at all the wired devices and then see if the uplink is coming from an AP, if it's a wired device. So what we did was Tim had a couple of these because I like to stock them, and the client had ordered one for one purpose, but he needed like 2 or 3 more. So it's the Flex switch. This is like one of my favorite UniFi products. I've mentioned this switch before. It's a 5-port switch. It can be powered by, yes, you guessed it, Jerry, PoE plus. You can supply whatever PoE you have
the name.
For the power. And if you're just using it as a switch with no PoE on the downlink ports, you can just, supply regular PoE or a PoE injector or whatever you want. The really cool thing about the Flex switch, though, is that if you power it by PoE plus or PoE plus, it will pass like the lesser version down the line to the connected devices. So in other words, you can have PoE coming from the main switch all the way through the house, and that's going to plug into the Flex switch, powering the switch, and then that's going to pass PoE down to the AP that's connected to that switch. So without having to route power somewhere and add a switch that way, you can just mount the Flex switch, get power from the rack, and pass the power down the line to one or more devices. Of course, what you can pass down, again, depends on what you're passing in. So you may need to spec a better switch up front. So some of the Pro switches, or most, I guess all the Pro switches, can provide PoE plus on those ports. Or another way to think about this is, let's say you do have a network rack, room, network closet, whatever. You can, maybe you've got a UPS there, battery backup, whatever, or I'll give you another example of that in a second. So you've got good power, you've got the uplink for your connection in some closet or some ceiling or whatever. You can just put a power injector, like a PoE plus 60 watt injector or whatever, in the network room and inject power there where you've got probably a battery backup, et cetera, send it down the line to your flex switch elsewhere in the house or in the office. So again, flex switch, PoE plus on the way in, you get PoE plus on the way out, or regular for access points and other things like that. And
those the flex switches, even though they're 5-port, they're not inexpensive. They're like $129 or something like that, right?
They're like $100, maybe more. I forget.
I think they're like $199 or something. I can't remember.
Right?
I'll look it up right now because there's another one I want to bring your attention to also, which is called the Switch Ultra. So I haven't had experience with it yet.
That's a lot of scratch for a 5-port switch.
All right, let me get you the pricing because
the need is great. If you don't have power in that area, it's perfect.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, so the Flex here, mini PoE. So there's an Ultra. There's now a line called the Ultra. So there's the Ultra switches. There is the indoor. Okay, so Flex, the other thing is that it's an indoor-outdoor switch. So you can actually use this outside to take one PoE link coming from inside and pass it down to outdoor stuff as well, cameras, whatever you've got. So the Flex is actually $99 for the 5-port switch. Again, indoor-outdoor, PoE plus on the input side, PoE plus out on 4 ports. Then you've got this new one called, again, the Ultra, which as best as I can tell, it's a very similar feature set where you can provide PoE plus on the way in, and you've got now 7 output ports instead of 4 with the other switch. So it's just basically
and the price on that, Joe? Since
that's $129. Yeah, so that's only $129. So the Ultra is $129. The Flex is $99. There's an Ultra 60 watt, which I think, I don't know, it's maybe gives you more PoE availability, but with different requirements or something like that. There's a 210 watt version. These are great products to be aware of, and they really helped in this case where we basically needed to replace an access point that had 2 devices, the uplink and the downlink, with a switch and an access point, and it works great.
Those moments though, when you're there and you're like that moment of, you know what I'm saying? Like all the equipment's there, they spent all this money. You're like,
Oh yeah, totally. Exactly. It's exactly what happens. And then furthermore, there's always this like erosion of the technical capital, like I like to say, where you're there, you're all geared up to go. The client is planning this day. Actually, it was a 2-day job, right? So Tim is, there on the first day, getting half the stuff configured and then finding, oh crap. And now the client's, if you didn't realize that, what else didn't you think of or whatever?
Knocks you down a notch.
Then you have compounding issues where at this one client, it went from bad to worse. It was like something we could handle. The network's up and running. Everything's fine. He installed some of the main stuff, ordered the switches, was planning to go back. Gets a call later that day that this TV is not working. One of their TVs wasn't working. So he's okay, gives the client some instructions, like just power cycle the little, I forget which device, like maybe with the cable box and the whatever wasn't working, like the universal remote or something. So she's okay, we'll try that. So fast forward a couple hours and now the network's down. We're like, what's going on here, guys? Wow. And client had.
Don't you hate that? Let me interject. Don't you just, isn't that just like your stomach is in knots? You're back at the office and it just, it ruins everything.
You're like, what the heck happened here? And
why am I in this business? And why did I?
Exactly.
Rethink your life choices. Exactly.
Yes. Totally. Yes. So Tim finds out that the client had her builder there and the builder said, okay, I can do that. Reboot the stuff for the TV, whatever. So he goes into the network closet, nowhere near the TV. And he sees the new stuff in the rack and he sees a reset button and he holds it down and he just reset the controller and gateway back to factory settings, takes everything offline. So luckily the client was like, so we're like,
you needed a MacWorks do not touch sticker on this.
Exactly.
Yeah. That was actually a MacWorks do not Jack Daniels.
Strong. JD Strong.
JD Strong. That was a JD Strong sticker that he sent me this. So we have to give him credit.
It's so true though. There's been a few examples of that recently where I thought I really should have something on here that says who to call if there's an issue, or now I understand the stop, do not freaking touch this thing. Yeah. Why? I don't know what the guy was thinking. Like, why would you do that? So Tim connects remotely to the client's laptop through a personal hotspot, whatever, readopts the thing somehow, and then has to restore a backup. Turns out only had the backup from the previous one because he only got halfway through the job, didn't back up the progress, whatever. It worked, gets the network back up and running, has to go back to basically readopt everything. And then, so it
was this client in area for you or far away?
Like, it was like a 45-minute drive.
Oh, for me, that's my closest client.
That's your normal,
It's a normal drive.
Supermarket for Jerry.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. No, it was not easy to resolve that. And of course, again, it's all in the context of, there was a little oversight. So then I'm, of course, as a business owner, wondering, like, how much is the client wondering, is this oversight related? Is this because of this? I know it's not related, but this all could have gone much smoother. And you just wonder if they have a question mark in their head about this now. And luckily she was fine. I talked to her the next day, and it turns out the TV hadn't been working before the visit. So it was not even related to the network job. So I have him on the phone. The client has me on speakerphone, and the builder is there. So we're talking about this. When she called me, this was the other thing. The next day, her heat doesn't work, and we're like, oh man. Now I'm like, Tim, what the heck's going on here? And so I go in, and I don't know how to log into Honeywell. I'm trying to reset my password. I just get this broken link when I try to reset my password. And I'm like, maybe the company's having an issue. Maybe it's not the network. All signs point to, we screwed something up with the network, like whatever. And the whole reason the heat's not working, in this one area, she couldn't control the heat. That's probably network related. Like, this one device didn't get plugged in or whatever. But she's trying to reset her password. It's not working. So we go online, and I see, sure enough, Honeywell, their service is down. This was the day that Google was down and Facebook was down, and there were like a bunch of mysterious outages. So Honeywell was one of them. So that's why she couldn't reset her password. I'm like, that's probably why this thing is not working. So then we find that there's also a Honeywell device in this one area that, like, in a crawl space that Tim wasn't even in, the cable was loose. So she goes and plugs in the cable, and then the device lights up. She still couldn't get into the system because their site's down, but at least the device was like online. So now the heat's going to work again. So it's just like this comedy of errors that all stem from like this other completely unrelated thing. So I'm talking to her about this thing. I'm like, okay, if you find the Honeywell thing, because it does look like the one is offline, the system thing hopefully will be fixed on its own. The Honeywell, if you can find it, I just want you to unplug it from power for 2 minutes and plug it back in. Don't do anything else. Like, I'm telling her, I'm like, don't reset it or anything like that. So she starts laughing. The builder is there on speakerphone. He hears me saying, whatever, you don't reset anything. She's laughing like, we won't. We learned our lesson. Sorry. So later, to top it all off, she says to me, I'm so sorry to freak out and imply that this was like your fault. None of this was your fault. Thank you so much. Whatever.
Wow.
Like, she was very apologetic. Yeah. So
that's
lesson learned. Make sure you're not using that second port on the access point. And if you are, the flex switch can save the day.
Wow. You did have a whole story about this.
Yeah.
You did. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sam, what do you have UniFi related?
So I was doing an upgrade of a client network. Really, I was replacing the firewall, which was a Zywall, and they already had UniFi access points from their previous company. They had switched over to us. So I'm like, let's get a UDM Pro in there and let's readopt all the access points. So we can't be down during the day, so you got to do it at night. So I'm like, fine, I'll go late at night. I really didn't want to, but I had no choice. So I did it after hours. I was in the building all by myself, which is a little creepy, this particular building. And I kept finding random switches in like closets and areas. I'm like, like unmanaged switches in all these different places.
Wow.
So that was a problem. But anyway, so to get to the heart of the matter, we had already taken in their access points into our offsite UniFi controller. So they were adopted through the set and form command, and they were running on our own controller. Right. So we were going to go in there, put in the UDM Pro, and then just readopt them through the UDM Pro. Mm-hmm. So I went there. I had pre-configured the UDM Pro to have the static IP, to have all the settings as the Zywall for VLANs and all that stuff, so it would make it easy. So I popped it in, and network came right back up. I was like, cool, that's working well. Now I just got to go to the other piece. So I'm like, I have an idea. I'll go and I'll grab the backup from my offsite controller and just restore it. And I'll I had this thought that I'd get all the Wi-Fi networks and all these other pieces in. So this is where it goes sideways. So I go and I grab, first of all, there was one cool thing. You know how if you have multiple sites, at least as far as I remember, when you grab a backup, it's all the sites in that backup. I don't think, if I remember, that you can grab a particular site. But I grabbed that multiple site backup and I brought it to the UDM Pro and it said, oh, this looks like that backup has multiple sites. Which site would you like to restore from? So I was like, that's cool. I didn't know you could do that. It was just total accident. So I picked my site, restored it, and it finished. And I was connected locally to that UDM Pro. So I saw it come back up. I'm like, okay, let me continue on. I start to go and readopt all the access points, and they all just go adoption failed, adoption failed, adoption failed, all throughout the office. I'm like, what? So I'm like, all right, there's one in reach. So I'll reset it and I'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Boom, adoption failed. I'm like, what the F? And I'm like, I can't figure this out. And you know how those days when you're also like punchy and it's 8 o'clock at night and you're just like, what am I doing wrong here? So I could not figure out why. Then I looked in all the portal of all the devices, again, connected locally, and they were all saying 192.168.1.20 as their IP. Do either of you guys know why they were showing that particular IP?
So my guess was going to be that set inform command issue. So there's a method to specify in the controller, like where to look for the controller or something like that. I forget because I don't run that. But
that's the recovery IP, right?
Of the device.
Did you get it?
Yeah.
Oh, of the cloud key or of the, what do you mean of the device?
It's the default IP that the device gives itself when there's no DHCP.
Okay.
But I was trying for a good half hour to 40 minutes going, I'm resetting and I'm like, why won't this work? And then
before you saw they all had the same IP.
Yes. So I'm like, oh crap. So I dig deeper and it turns out that even though I had the UDM Pro all set up, ready to rock and roll, when I had restored the backup, that backup was assuming a different firewall. So DHCP was off.
Got it.
So I restored and turned off DHCP across the network.
Oof.
And so all the APs they wouldn't get an IP address. Right. So I wiped out all my VLANs and all the settings that I had originally set up off-site. I totally effed myself when I was there. It was just a big, stupid mistake.
Wow.
But it took a while for me to figure out. And then as soon as I figured that out, I set the DHCP scope and boom, all the APs started to show up. They adopted just fine. At this point, it was like 9 o'clock at night. I was like, thank goodness, because I was starting to freak out. I was just like, I got an hour and a half drive home. It's 9 o'clock. What am I going to do here? They're going to come in the morning and be like, nothing works.
Right.
So it was that oh shit moment again that you're feeling like, why am I here? Why do I do this job for a living? This sucks.
That's right.
Yeah. I know because you've mentioned this on the show before, that's like your workflow where you get the stuff and you set it up ahead of time thinking you'll save time, save headaches and stuff like that. I can't say, I would configure it on site because I do this all the time. I don't do it all the time. But it's a compelling case to just say, out of the box, it used to be UniFi was a little janky out of the box and things wouldn't work and configure. But it's gotten so much better. I'd almost think like maybe you should do it on the fly next time.
Yeah, maybe. I think my thought process, and this obviously was not the case this time, is it would save me on-site time because I'm sitting in the comfort of my office. But I screwed myself this time, so it was the total opposite effect. But had I done it, I think it would have been an easy install and readoption because you got to set the static IP on the device, make sure it can get online. And you know what? In this case, Jerry, you might be right. It might be like 6 of 1. Could have just done it on site and be done with it.
Yeah, I agree. I was thinking about this recently too, because in those early days, we were doing the same thing. We were pre-staging it in our office. We had a static IP that we could use, unused from the rest of our network, or you just cascade it off of your existing network, whatever. And you configure and adopt and update, and it's great because you're going to have to do that. And like you said, Sam, you can spend the time in the comfort of your own home or office or whatever and get half the work done, and then just go and plug and play. Just install it in the rack and put in the APs, and everything just lights up and it works. But yeah, I think you're right, Jerry, that it's much like it's more stable. We don't at that point in time, it was the comfort factor, but also let's test it out and make sure it's all good because we weren't so sure in those earlier days. And these days it's been fine. And so we've just been doing it just on the fly like that. But we did have one other UniFi case where we needed a backup basically. So we do stock like a UDM as a backup, and Tim needed it on site. And the issue was that this client had Comcast. We don't often have Comcast. I know you do, Jerry, and you haven't had this issue. I don't think it was a Comcast issue, but that was like one variable that Tim and I think were stuck on. Maybe this is a Comcast thing. Like, what the heck's going on? The issue was when we first he installed the UDM, adopted some stuff, and then tried to update the UDM. The first update works, and the second update, like, it just takes the whole network down. And the UDM reports on the front, like, no cable connected, like no uplink, no WAN, nothing connected to the WAN port. So the only solution he found was he like reconfigured a brand new device and stopped short of that update and got the thing working. That's just the one counterpoint to the stability stuff of out of the box. I don't know if the UDM was part of it. I don't know if a certain update past a certain point, like you couldn't go back in time. I don't know. But so having the extra device was pretty crucial in that case. But yeah.
For sure.
Sam, the backup thing though is curious too, because we had this issue come up where a client moved and a person bought their house and they wanted to keep all the equipment except for the controller, basically. So we replaced a UDM like SE with like a cheap UDM, right? So we took the backup of the UDM SE, installed the brand new UniFi Dream machine, or maybe it's a UniFi Dream router, I forget which one, restored the backup of the prior controller to the new device, and everything worked. Everything was adopted, like it's all just fine. Yeah. And that was great because the client was moving, taking the expensive piece with her to the new home and just leaving behind the access points and all the other infrastructure and selling that as part of the home. Did all that, everything was fine. Fast forward to one of the recent UniFi updates, and that new client, so let's say the old name was Smith Family and the new name was Johnson Family. So the controller in the list in the UniFi portal started showing as the old client name.
I've seen that.
Forever it's been showing the correct name. And why did it revert? We didn't even know that name was still in there. So what I think happened was, and I'm curious if you have a thought, Jerry, on having seen that, but I think it was restoring the backup of the like more high-end device that supports multiple sites to a device that I assume doesn't support multiple sites, so that the name of the site was actually embedded in there with the original name, but is no longer relevant to the new device. So it was just like masked out, not shown, whatever. There's no place you can even change it because, again, it's like a device that doesn't support multiple sites anyway. So that's my theory. So I reached out to UniFi support. They needed more info, whatever, back and forth a couple times, never heard anything back. And one day I just noticed it's fine now. So they did something. I don't really know. They either changed the portal design or they like went into my controller and fixed it. I don't know, but like it's working now. So yeah, where have you seen that, Jerry? It's a message of backups. Yeah.
Just changing the name of the site on the controller and then in the portal, it not honoring that change. And then one day it was finally reading the right customer's name.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah. Cause I've seen generic ones too, where it would be like UDM SE. And I'm like, no, we named this. Like, why is that showing? Yeah. So
you know what
it's weird. You know.
What I found is helpful, instead of putting the client name sometimes, is to put the street number and the street, like 34 Sagamore, and just that's what you call it, the site. And that seems, it's agnostic and.
Look at you.
Yeah, look at me go. Hey, before we leave the Ubiquiti UniFi corner, I had purchased a couple months ago the cable internet that works with Comcast, Charter, Cox, and I couldn't get rid of it. I couldn't install it right away because then I realized that when we bought this place, we had inherited an alarm system that was still on the copper line. So I needed to reach out to the alarm guy to convert it to an alert notification that would use VoIP and not use the copper line anymore. So I got that done, and I was really excited, and I put the modem in, $279. And I was getting slower speeds than the one that Xfinity was telling me that they had decommissioned and were no longer supporting. It was a Netgear Blackhawk. So, a lot of the Netgear products are called that. And I was getting somewhere on 80 megabits up and over 1,000 down, right? And that's what I'm paying for because my area doesn't support higher upload speeds.
Yeah.
And so I put in this Xfinity router and I was getting 38 megabit upload speeds. I keep saying router, but modem.
Yeah.
So I was checking the different forums, and I finally got resolution on Reddit just by following some threads on Reddit. And some people were saying that you needed to reach out to Xfinity and petition them to re-provision the modem, the new modem that I put in, by initializing it with the correct boot file. It just pulls down the wrong boot file for some reason.
Interesting.
And so it took 2 hours of chat back and forth, but I wasn't using Xfinity chat through my phone. I was using Reddit chat because they have their own channel on there. And finally went through a number of agents, and it literally took 2 hours, but now I finally got higher speeds than the one I decommissioned. There's not much to the product. It's just one Ethernet jack in the front and just a little display on the far left, like most of the Ubiquiti products have, but finally it's working properly.
So do you anticipate, is this something that we'd have to watch out for, or is just like an issue with Xfinity in particular?
It could be. It could very well be. Or if I would definitely, before you swap modems, check your speeds. And because they're calling this particular device, even though they don't make it, Xfinity, because Xfinity would love to sell you the products that they're selling their clients or renting to their clients. But they're calling it like a next generation product. And for a long time in the forums, I thought that my area hadn't had the proper profiles sent to the area. Because I guess a lot of this is regional. I don't know. It just seems like mumbo jumbo to me.
Yeah.
But
yeah, no, I agree. I've been for the longest time looking for some kind of standard recommendation I can make for cable internet providers. So we've been using Optimum. We talk about them on the show sometimes. Their equipment has gotten worse. Their support has gotten worse. Service, the fact that they haven't really increased their speed, at least in terms of upload. I'm curious what you're getting now that it's working. Were you getting more than 80 megabits on the upload speed, Jerry?
No, with the Netgear one that they said was, and this was a DOCSIS 3.1 Netgear Blackhawk modem. But the reason why I had it in service, because it was an EMTA modem, so it could do phone. So that's the caveat, is that if your client needs an EMTA modem, you can't use this UniFi product. Yeah, they just have to. Yeah. So sometimes it's a deal breaker.
Yeah.
But so now I'm getting 110, whereas I was getting only an 80 upload speed.
Either one of those is good. Compared to Optimum, they're like 35 standard, and I think you can pay for more. If you pay for one of their like really high-end things, you get 50 megabits on the upload, but I don't think they go faster than that. And like I said, their equipment is not great anymore. They use these modem router combos and cheap stuff. And like they never support bridge mode, even if they like might support bridge mode. I don't rely on it because of kind of the issues like the mumbo jumbo stuff where like they send an update and then stuff happens and like it doesn't work anymore and it goes out of bridge mode or just crazy stuff like that.
Right.
And so I'm looking for, and I've asked them, like I've had clients ask them for recommendations. What's the modem that you have? Surely you have a list in your support stuff that you could just say, here's the model number of a modem that we would recommend.
Xfinity does, and they do support that list and update it quite frequently.
Apparently for Optimum, either they don't, or we've had two cases now. So one case was the issue you're describing where there's no phone line on the modem. So Optimum recommended to my client, this is the model you need. I forget if we ordered it or we just looked it up or whatever, but there's no phone built in. And I asked the client, you still have phone on there, right? Yes. So Optimum recommended a modem that would have not worked for this one client. And then in this other case where the Optimum recommended a modem, we had the client order it. We go to the house to switch the modem to the new one, provision it, and install UniFi. So we get there to do that, and the modems, it didn't work. And the client talked to another tech, had to have Optimum come out to her house. Now she has no internet, whatever. And they said, oh, this modem's not compatible. And she was like annoyed with us. I got that number from you. You talked to Optimum. They told you that number. You told me. I gave you the link. You bought it. So it's just, this is like literally step zero of anything we do is like the client having internet. And like, why can't we just have a good ISP locally where we have a modem that we can recommend that's reliable? So I wish they would make this thing for Optimum or Optimum would support it. But I think like you said, it's only specific providers where
it's Cox, Charter, and Comcast. But the interesting thing is that they will support Comcast Business, and most times you see them clinging to in their cold dead hands their Xfinity gateways that they want to sell to businesses. But I'm surprised. But I'm looking at the webpage here, and it's supported.
I'm glad you have that, at least in your area. The other thing that Optimum has been doing is they're switching clients to fiber. They're just whatever. It's marketing. They recommend that they put the thing on the door. They say, we want to switch you to fiber. I don't know why. Anyway, they get these clients convinced to just make the switch. Maybe they're going to save money or something. So the clients always call us after. They're like, Optimum was here. Now nothing works. I'm like, great. Thanks for keeping us posted about that. And after the fact, right now I'm screaming.
Can you come this afternoon?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Meanwhile, they waited 2 weeks for the appointment from Optimum. Now they need me today. So it's great. So I've had a couple of these come up now where if they had the UniFi system, out of the box, UniFi is using whatever IP. I forget what it is. It might be like 192.168.0. whatever or 1. whatever. Optimum comes in, puts in their fiber thing, which is a modem and router like unit, which then is using the same IP as the UniFi gateway. So basically, like the solution is connect to the gateway locally and just change the IP schema, reboot, and you're good to go. So to your point earlier, Jerry, about the house address, this takes me back to the days when we would have to anticipate maybe needing VPN into a client, and we would change the IP schema to something like the street address. If they're at number 24, any street, you make the IP schema 192.168.24. whatever, just as a way of making up a number. That's like what we did. And so I think part of our plan should be change the IP schema, because if some Optimum person comes in and switches out their system, you could have a conflict, and then that causes all kinds of issues.
Yeah, I think in general, I like the idea of always changing the default IP scheme just to play it safe for situations like that. But also just the 192.168, if you ever, like you were saying, I think earlier, with like connection to VPNs and stuff like that, you're going to have some sort of where it thinks it's on the network, but it's not in the situation.
Right. Yeah, the local and the remote need to be different in that scenario. And even though VPNs are really much less used these days, and certainly that was only something we ever cared about in business. Now I think it's maybe a good idea to do that in a residential setting anyway, just to avoid the possibility of this kind of conflict.
Yeah.
Got anything else on UniFi as we wrap up?
Always tons of stuff on UniFi, but got to leave something for the people in the future. So
maybe we'll talk about this in a Patreon show. But the mission critical switch. I finally had. I finally had some experience with that. Worked out well. Seems to be a great product so far. And as far as I can tell, it operates as a UPS. So you can. Obviously, it's designed to power the UniFi stuff, but you can also. It has an AC port, so you can plug in anything. But obviously, I wouldn't plug in high power draw stuff, but we have the cable modem, like a couple of
curling iron
switches and things. Yeah. Right. Oh, don't get me started about that. I have a client who brought down their whole network and server with a space heater plugged into one of the battery backups.
Nice.
So that was really not good.
Nice.
But so the mission critical is a good product also for that.
Jerry does his voices of customers of all kinds.
Am I on the cloud?
Joe spins his deeply detailed yarns all the time.
I have a whole story about this.
Sam is on the road again, phoning in from a hotel.
At least we know where I am.
Half a century combined of Apple expertise right now. Right now. My Mac is slow. Have you tried restarting? Well, the fans won't blow. Have you tried restarting? But my data is gone. Have you tried restarting? I dropped it in the pond.